Marilyn Mosby's second federal trial nearing a close. Our team is at the federal courthouse and will bring you the latest as it happens. An emotional plea from a family struck by tragedy, their daughter brutally murdered. The changes they're demanding in Annapolis to prevent another family from going through the same. 2 requests from the defense team in the Brooklyn Day mass shooting trial denied by a judge. Why she says the trial needs to remain open to the public and why the suspect will not go into the juvenile system.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 4.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. Jury deliberations continue in the federal mortgage trial of Marilyn Mosby.
Now, these deliberations have been going on for more than 6 hours. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost has been in Greenbelt all day. So, Mackenzie, while we wait for a verdict, can you tell us about some of the evidence that they saw during the trial?
Yeah, Kai and Mary, that's important because at this rate, it's only assumed that that is what the jury is going over. They saw a few different pieces of evidence. Let's start with the mortgage applications. These are the forms that Marilyn Mosby says were filled out by her broker incorrectly because it indicates that she checked a box saying that she did not have any outstanding federal tax debt or liabilities. Marilyn says that she did review those forms but believed everything was accurate because she was under the impression that her former husband, City Council President Nick Mosby, was up to date on the installment agreements to pay off the couple's back taxes. Then the jury saw a letter Marilyn Mosby wrote when she was looking to buy that condo in Longboat Key. She indicated that she had been in Florida for the past 70 days, staying at the Kissimmee home. However, we know based on travel records and the FBI forensic accountant going through her own finances, Marilyn Mosby was not in Florida for the 70 days. It was closer to 40 days. And going back to the Kissimmee home, the jury also saw the second home rider that Marilyn Mosby signed when she purchased it, indicating that she would not give up any control of the property. But we know a week prior to signing those documents and closing on the home, she already signed a contract with the property management company to oversee some rentals. The jury also saw a gift letter. That's the form that Nick Mosby signed as well as Marilyn signed.
The anguish in identifying her body, saying it was unrecognizable. House Bill 301, or the Pava Laer Act, pushes for changes to the state's early release system, specifically prohibiting those convicted of first-degree rape or a first-degree sex offense from earning diminution credit, meaning time off their sentence for good behavior. Jason Billingsley, the man accused of murdering Laer at her apartment building in Baltimore back in September, got out of prison early due to earning this good time credit. Back in 2013, Billingsley was convicted of a first-degree sex offense and released early in October 2022. Less than a year later, police say Billingsley raped another woman and then murdered Laer. Before today's testimony, Laer's family said they were focused on speaking from the heart.
Pava did very well in her very short life, so now it's time for someone else to carry the torches that she carried. One of them was for equity, another for justice, so that's why we're here.
And our goal is to keep those torches lit.
There were no questions from the House Judiciary Committee in terms of others who testified on behalf of this bill. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates and Baltimore City Councilman Mark Conway, who heads the Public Safety Committee, both also testified. Hear from them at 5. For now, reporting live in Annapolis, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Alexa, thank you. This morning, a Baltimore City Circuit Court judge ruled the court proceedings from Tristan Jackson will remain open to the public.
That's right. The judge in the case also denying the 18-year-old's request to be transferred to a juvenile facility.
Jackson is currently awaiting trial for nearly 60 violent charges issued in connection to the city's worst mass shooting in history. 2 young people were killed and 28 others were shot during the Brooklyn Day block party.
Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor joins us now live from the Mitchell Courthouse with arguments from both sides. Rebecca.
Mary and Kai, these were two big wins for the prosecution today. Ultimately, a judge agreeing with their argument that Jackson was 18 at the time of his alleged crimes and should be treated as such under the law. Meanwhile, the defense continues to push for juvenile protections despite Jackson's age. What court proceedings the public is privy to concerning 18-year-old Tristan Jackson up for debate inside the Mitchell Courthouse Tuesday. As one of the accused gunmen behind the devastating Brooklyn Day mass shooting, Jackson awaits trial for a laundry list of violent charges, including more than 24 counts of attempted and conspiracy to commit murder. Due to the severity of his alleged crimes and the sheer number of victims, the state pushing to retain the public's access to information involving his case, as the defense pushes to place it behind closed doors. Although no specific threats or concerns were detailed, the defense arguing the public's knowledge of where Jackson is being detained poses a safety risk to him and his family. The defense also accusing the state of leaking misinformation to the media. Defense attorney Lauren Dollar saying, quote, "They're using this to try to grow animus against our client and taint the jury pool, Your Honor, which is inappropriate." Prosecutor Michael Dunty responding with, quote, "They are asking this court to control what the media puts out there, and that's not this court's role at all." City State's attorney Ivan Bates also refuting the allegations with a statement of his own, reading in part, quote, "The fact that they would attack my staff and me personally for simply doing our jobs and protecting public safety is highly inappropriate."
I think it is very important that the residents see and understand and hear firsthand what's going on.
Attorney and legal expert Eurypsy Morgan, who has no direct ties to this case, says considering the tragedy that occurred, the Brooklyn community deserves transparency.
It would prevent the people in those communities from feeling safe again and knowing that the criminal justice system is doing everything it can to make sure that the perpetrators of that crime are being dealt with effectively.
Ultimately, Judge Jennifer Schiffer agreeing. One of the foundations of our system is that access to a public criminal trial enhances the integrity of the criminal justice system, said Schiffer, denying the request to seal court records. The defense then making the motion to transfer Jackson to a juvenile facility to pair him with educational and mental health services he's not allotted in the adult system.
This is an 18-year-old. This is a legal adult. Why would we even be discussing having an adult be put into a juvenile system?
Both Morgan and the state calling the request illogical and absurd.
This is somebody who has proven that, they cannot be out in society with everyone else and maintain the safety of the community.
Assisting in the decision-making, Assistant Attorney General for Juvenile Services, Antonio Rivera, advising Judge Schiffer she does not have the authority to guarantee Jackson would remain detained under DJS supervision. With that in mind, Schiffer denying the transfer, citing clear and convincing evidence and her duty to protect public safety. Now, among the evidence that we already know the prosecution plans to present in this case, police have said that Jackson was seen several times on CCTV surveillance camera spraying shots into fleeing crowds. Police also saying that GPS coordinates from a DJS ankle monitor that Jackson had on from a prior offense placed him at the scene of the crime. Reporting live from the Mitchell Courthouse, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Breaking news tonight, a report on the Alaska Airlines door blowout says key parts were missing from the plane. According to the NTSB, the 4 bolts meant to hold the Boeing 737 MAX 9's door plug in place were missing before it blew out. The regulators say the lack of damage to the plug where the bolts should have been indicate they were never there to begin with. Boeing is taking responsibility and says it's working to prevent future mistakes.
A big change for the Baltimore Ravens today. Zach Orr had his first media appearance as the team's new defensive coordinator. Orr says he'll uphold the high standards that make the Ravens one of the best defensive units in the NFL.
I want our defense to play together first and foremost, like 11 people playing as one. Let's start there. The next thing, I want to be violent, organized chaos, man, present a lot of problems to the offense. All right, never give the answer to the offense before the snap.
Well, Orr signed with the Ravens himself in 2014 as an underrated free agent. He went on to play for the team until 2016, earning second-team All-Pro honors. In 2017, he joined the staff as defensive analyst. He spent one season as Jacksonville's linebackers coach in 2021 before returning to Baltimore in 2022 as the Ravens linebacker coach. Now he's taking over as defensive coordinator. Well, that brings us to our question of the day. Do you agree with Orr's promotion to defensive coordinator? To make your voice heard, head to foxbaltimore.com/vote and click on the sports tab.
Coming up after the break, the race for the White House is heating up as Joe Biden and Donald Trump both face legal troubles, how these controversies are impacting their bid for president.
I'm Atrell Nashar in Washington with why a federal appeals court says former President Trump is not immune from prosecution in the 2020 election subversion case.
It has been a very predictable start to your week. Look at this, more of the same. But as we head into the end of the week, it is anything but. Temperatures are on the rise. Could we really hit 60 degrees this weekend? We're going to talk about an active weather pattern that's going to be returning. Talk about impacts, too, coming up.
If this November's presidential election is indeed a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, here's what voters say they're most concerned about. According to a new NBC News poll, 3/4 of voters, including half of Democrats, say they have concerns about 81-year-old President Biden's mental and physical health. By comparison, 61% of all voters, about a quarter of Republicans, say they're concerned about former President Trump's multiple criminal indictments. A federal appeals court rules former President Trump is not immune from prosecution in the criminal case alleging he tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The former president is expected to appeal the decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. National correspondent Atrell Nashar explains the ruling and what could happen next.
A major blow to former President Trump's defense in special counsel Jack Smith's election subversion case dealt unanimously by a federal appeals court. They write, We cannot accept former President Trump's claim that a president has unbounded authority to commit crimes that would neutralize the most fundamental check on executive power, the recognition and implementation of election results.
I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple.
The court disagrees, writing, instead of inhibiting the president's lawful discretionary action, the prospect of federal criminal liability might serve as a structural benefit to deter possible abuses of power and criminal behavior. Trump has until Monday to appeal this to the Supreme Court. Former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick.
I expect they're going to say he doesn't have immunity and that they're going to do it on an expedited basis.
Trump faces 4 felony charges in this case, 2 for allegedly conspiring to defraud the United States through claims about the 2020 election Trump knew were false, and attempting to oppress, threaten, and intimidate Americans from voting and having their vote counted. And 2 charges for allegedly obstructing and attempting to obstruct official proceedings to certify election results. Assuming the Supreme Court also says no, Trump does not have immunity because he was president, what else could his team use as a defense?
The primary one appears to be that they're going to say, look, the former president was advised by lawyers. They gave him the green light to do many of the things that he did connected to January 6th. They'll also say he had a First Amendment right to say certain things. I think a First Amendment argument is probably going to be uphill.
Trump's political allies quick to echo a claim he's made many times before.
I believe that they've been after President Trump for partisan political purposes. I think that's obvious.
The judge in this case, Tanya Chutkin, recently scrapped the trial's original March 4th start date to wait for the courts to rule on Trump's immunity claim. Now she's expected to assign a new date as soon as we learn how or if the Supreme Court weighs in. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atrell Nishar reporting.
The results are in for Monday's national question of the day. We asked, who do you think would do a better job handling the economy, the border crisis, and foreign policy? 21% said President Biden, 79% said former President Trump. Historic rainfall across Southern California continues today. The National Weather Service notes that nearly half the average seasonal rainfall for Los Angeles has come down in just 2 days. It is the second day in a row of record daily rainfall in L.A., and it is the third wettest 2-day rainfall in downtown L.A. since record-keeping started back in 1877. Several areas are under flash flood warnings and watches with the potential for more mudslides. Power outages persist in Northern California. Close to 150,000 customers don't have their electricity back on because of those high winds that swept through. It's down from 800,000 over the weekend. AccuWeather says damages and economic loss for the state could be between $9 and $11 billion already. Well, let's take a live look over the Inner Harbor today. Beautiful here at home. We are continuing to see lots of sunshine, and it looks like we may see some spring-like temperatures heading into the weekend. Let's bring in Chief Meteorologist Gerard Jabali with a look at our forecast. Gerard, this sounds perfect.
Oh, it does look wonderful outside. It is a little chilly. You were telling me that as you're coming in today.
Yes, more so than I expected. I had to bundle up a little bit.
Don't blame you one bit. I mean, it's still in the mid-40s, although that is kind of our average, but we are going to see that moving up quite a bit. Now, the deal is, as we get to some warmer temperatures, it's probably not going to look quite like this. I mean, this is spectacular. Not a cloud in the sky. And temperature, again, 43 degrees right now is a little on the chilly side. Don't blame anyone. And we still have a lot of dry air around. See the dew point? 19. That is some pretty dry air coming down from Canada. But that's getting ready to shift in a big way. So we'll talk about that. All right, temperatures in and around the area still, again, mostly in the low 40s. The water temperature also matching that. But as we get in the next several days, the mercury is going to be creeping upward. Tonight's still somewhat of a chilly night, dropping to near freezing. We may be a degree or two above from what we saw last night, but sunshine all day long tomorrow. Maybe just some very small passing clouds. But look at this. We're already about 5 to 8 degrees warmer, near 50 as we move into your Wednesday. Thursday, we'll dial it up even further, but as you notice, we're getting a little bit of cloud cover trying to show up here. So we're going to likely be, upwards of 55 degrees or so as we get a little bit later down the road. But this is what we're talking about with that temperature trend. Yes, 60s are at least a good possibility as we move into the weekend, which is pretty far above your average high of around 44, 45 degrees. That's the way it's going to stay before we drop back down again. Now, what kind of weather are we going to have as we're looking into the weekend? Well, That system we've been talking about in California is going to have some impacts as we head later into the weekend, and we could see more of a stormier pattern coming our way. We've been under high pressure all this time, meaning it's been very, very pleasant. High pressure is in control to completely take away any rain chances, but that colder air is going to start fading away as we move into the coming days. That low pressure that is moving off will mean our winds will start to change direction. Ahead of this one, this is a California storm. Doesn't look too impressive, and I wouldn't expect it to do much more than maybe bring us some cloud cover. We'll get some warmer air out ahead of it, but we are tracking our next storm system to likely take shape, and this one could bring us some impacts as we move into the weekend. Where does it go? That's a huge debate right now. There's a lot of disparity in the data, but we are tracking to see what this storm is going to be doing over the coming days. We're going to talk about this a whole lot more, what impacts we'll see, 7-day forecast, all that coming up in the next half hour.
The road to the big game is sponsored by Royal Farms.
A live look from Las Vegas tonight. More than $20 billion is expected to be at stake when the big game kicks off in Vegas for the first time. Approximately 67.8 million adults, that's 26% of the adult population of the U.S., could combine to bet $23.1 billion on the big game between San Francisco and Kansas City, according to survey results released by the American Gaming Association. Both figures, the number of bettors and the amount wagered, are up significantly from last year's survey. Well, still ahead, we continue to follow the federal mortgage trial of Marilyn Mosby as jury deliberations continue. We speak to a legal expert about what comes next. But first, the world loses a country music legend, how fans are remembering the late Toby Keith. Country singer-songwriter Toby Keith has passed away at the age of 62. A statement posted to Keith's website says the singer, who was battling stomach cancer, died peacefully Monday, surrounded by his family. Keith was known for his patriotism that often presented itself in his music. Songs included "Should Have Been a Cowboy," "Beer for My Horses," and "How Do You Like Me Now" are among his top 20 #1 Billboard hits. Keith leaves behind a wife and 3 children. Now, the country music community taking to X to honor Toby Keith. Singer Cole Swindell writes, R.I.P. Toby Keith. Tell folks you love him while you can. Life is short. The older I get, the more I realize how true it is. Singer Zach Bryan says, too many rides in my old man's car listening to Toby Keith. Really hard thing to hear. Rest in peace, friend. We love you. And singer Brantley Gilbert writing, woke up to news that Toby Keith had passed. He was a class act, a friend, and one of the most talented guys you'll ever meet. We will miss you down here, man. Rest in peace. Coming up after the break, the proposed juvenile crime plan from Democrats front and center in Annapolis. We speak to those on both sides of the aisle. Plus, lawmakers taking action following a Project Baltimore investigation that found a juvenile sex offender was allowed inside a Baltimore City school. The efforts to make sure this never happens again.
Jury deliberations continue in former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby's second federal trial.
Let's bring in criminal defense attorney Kurt Nachman. He's not affiliated with the case, but speaking to us as a legal expert tonight. Kurt, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It has been pretty quiet from the jury all day. Just one note to a judge that was not made public. What do you read from these long deliberations so far? A couple hours.
Well, a couple hours is really not that long of deliberations. Undoubtedly, there's a lot of paperwork. They may not have gotten a real good chance to take a look at during the trial, and that they may want to review the mortgage applications that are in question in the case. And, you know, if anybody's bought a house that's out there listening, you know, they know there's hundreds and hundreds of pages in any mortgage application that you have. So they're going to want to take their time and review that. So I wouldn't necessarily take too much out of one day's worth of deliberations.
Hey, Kurt, what's the waiting period like if you're the defense, the prosecution? What's going through their minds?
You know, you as a defense attorney or a prosecutor, and I've been both, you know, you sort of sit there and you wait for questions as a lawyer, and you wonder and you really think really long and hard into the meaning of any question you get from a jury. And sometimes the questions are as simple as, can we go to lunch? Or can we have a break where we get out and stretch our legs? And so there's a lot of anticipation and a lot of tension in both the defense camp and the prosecution camp.
I want to ask you about that. They did send a note to the judge, but it wasn't made public what the note said. Is that standard procedure? Because I feel like we usually do find out what they are asking.
It may have been something personal about one of the jurors having a family issue or needing to make a phone call, for example, to a family member about a health-related issue, something that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to make public. And I can certainly see why the judge would want to keep that record under seal. But yes, normally juror notes are part of the court record.
And Kurt, quickly before you go, and again, back to the defense and prosecution, while you're waiting, are you second guessing the last things that you said to the jury, how you presented the case? Oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. Does that go through your mind, or do you think most attorneys, they're just ready for the verdict?
100 times out of 100, you're going to second guess everything you said.
Okay.
Throughout the course of the case, the presentation, usually you don't start having those problems until maybe after a couple days of deliberation, and you start worrying about those things. But ultimately, there's only so many things you can control on that, and the jury deliberation is certainly not one of them.
All right, Kurt Nachman, thanks for speaking with us tonight as we wait for a verdict in Marilyn Mosby's second federal trial. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
3 Baltimore County teens have been arrested for shooting another teen on Sunday night. All 3, ages 16, 17, and 19, are being charged as adults. Police say one of the teens told another to shoot the victim in the head while the victim was down. Detectives say a neighbor stepped in with their own gun to hold the teens until police arrived. Now, this latest incident is reigniting concerns over juvenile crime across the state. Fox 45's Patrice Sanders spoke with a state delegate and senator on the proposed juvenile crime plans from Democrats.
Lawmakers are taking a deeper dive into the juvenile crime plan presented by Maryland Democrats last week. The plan would increase probation and require police to document any youth taken into custody. It also outlines changes for the Department of Juvenile Services. That includes a shorter deadline for intake decisions and more staff within the ankle monitoring unit. Now, parts of the plan seem to have bipartisan support.
Well, it's a welcomed response to the juvenile crime, especially that we've seen just increase too high. Republicans last year, I was the sponsor of a bill to repeal the juvenile reform law that failed to hold juveniles accountable for crimes, anyone under 13. And so it's a welcomed response, and I think we will find bipartisan support for especially the juvenile crime reform bill that's coming forward.
Senator Carter, this is something you all can now work with Republicans to continue to move across the finish line?
Certainly. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the bills and to possibly offering necessary amendments to the bills. If you recall, even the governor said he expected us to put a great product on his desk, meaning that it's a start, maybe not a finish. I think the bill contains good, bad, and ugly, to be honest with you.
It's not all smooth sailing, though. The Child Interrogation Act not on the table for reform, and there's disagreement about whether it should be.
No, it isn't. And, I think it's interesting because I say all the time to my colleagues across the aisle that just as we are to respect the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, we've got to respect the Fifth Amendment as well. And so it's a constitutional protection that children are entitled to based on the Supreme Court over the last decade has made it clear. So I don't think that needs to be touched. But let me also say really quickly that even under current law, it's not correct to say only kids under 13. Any child in the state of Maryland under current law that is accused of an act of violence, a felony act of violence, is subject now to both detention, charges, and incarceration, and restriction in a secure facility. I don't like to call it incarceration. So it's not true to say that the law currently doesn't hold any kid accountable. But what I do like is finally to hold
Senator
adults
Carter.
accountable.
That is not true, Senator Carter.
Read the
You know
law.
it. The
Read the law.
state's attorneys have come forward and said they cannot hold juveniles under 13 accountable under the current law unless it's first-degree murder or a first-degree sex
All you have to do
offense.
is read the law.
We know that's not true, and the Senate does not work. That's why we're
Carjacking
here,
is
and
definitely
that's what
eligible.
Governor Moore has said.
Nobody said that. If they did, they didn't read the law.
And you can expect that discussion will continue over the course of this session. Patrice Sanders, Fox 45 News.
And Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost will be in Annapolis following every step of this year's session over the next 2 months. Keep up with our coverage on air and online at foxbaltimore.com.
Project Baltimore is sponsored by the Snyder Law Group. Don't just sue them, Snyder them.
Lawmakers are taking action following a Project Baltimore investigation that found a 15-year-old who admitted to rape taking classes inside of a Maryland public school.
As Project Baltimore's Chris Papps explains, lawmakers have just over 2 months to pass a law to prevent it from ever happening again.
In 2024, there are not many political issues that unite Republicans and Democrats.
Tonight, the mother of a rape victim has come forward with a terrifying warning for parents.
But this recent Project Baltimore investigation is prompting outrage on both sides of the aisle.
I was sickened, I was angered, I was disgusted.
Delegate Nino Mangione is a Republican from Baltimore County. Democrat Bill Ferguson is the Senate president from Baltimore City.
As a parent, as any parent, immediately it was a sense of horror and hard to understand.
Two lawmakers with strong reactions when Project Baltimore first reported that a rapist was taking classes inside Patterson High School in Baltimore City. The student is 15 years old. In late December, he entered a plea to second-degree rape in Harford County. At the same time, Fox 45 discovered he was facing an additional second-degree rape charge from an alleged 2022 incident in Baltimore County. Yet, in January, after winter break, he was back in a city school. And because he's a juvenile, the district could not legally alert other students or their parents.
I think this is probably the single most important thing I can be a part of in Annapolis. This is about protecting the children.
The day after Fox 45 broke this story, Mangione requested a bill be drafted to prevent this type of situation from happening again. Maryland's Constitution guarantees a public education for all students. Currently, under Maryland law, a juvenile sex offender who is not on the sex offender registry cannot be removed from a school unless there is an imminent threat of serious harm to the health and safety of other students and staff. Mangione says if a student is already convicted of a serious crime, that should constitute an imminent threat. Mangione's proposed bill would create a list of juvenile offenses, including second-degree rape, that would bar a student from attending school in person. Instead, other educational options would be available, such as virtual learning or homeschooling.
This has certainly got my attention.
Senate President Ferguson could not comment on Mangione's proposed legislation. It's still being drafted, but he said he's conducting his own investigation to find out how a rapist could end up in a public school in the city that he represents.
If there's a 15-year-old that has a convicted second-degree rape, something's not going well, and there is a real serious major intervention that is necessary, because the last thing in the world that can happen is to see it happen again.
Ferguson, who is a former Baltimore City teacher, said he plans to gather details from city schools, the Department of Juvenile Services, and the courts to find out exactly what led to the student being allowed in Patterson High School, and if laws need to be changed to stop it from happening again. He plans to change them.
You know, it's something we really want to understand what's happening, and if there are places where the law has to be adjusted, then we have to do it. This is something that I can understand where people's, especially the family of the victim, it just is incomprehensible. And so we want to see if there is something that we can do. We want to pursue it.
The 2024 legislative session in Annapolis ends on April 10th. Lawmakers have 65 days.
And this is not a partisan bill. As a matter of fact, I think this is something that all Marylanders can come together and agree on.
Project Baltimore has reached out to every member of the Maryland General Assembly asking if they support legislation that would require parental notification when a juvenile who is found to have committed a sex offense or other violent crime is attending a Maryland public school. We also asked, should parents have been notified that a rapist was attending a Patterson High School? We'll be following the responses from lawmakers and keep you updated. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Coming up after the break, a bipartisan border bill surfaces in the Senate. Why those in opposition argue it won't work. More Americans say saving money is becoming nearly impossible. We take a closer look at what's behind their concern and small steps you can take to prepare for the future.
All right, here's what I'm keeping track of. We've been watching the weather pattern be pretty stagnant for a while, but now we're starting to see some indications it's about to get very busy. A storm system may begin developing as we go into early next week. What could this bring us, and what are the potentials that we could see some wintry impacts around here? We'll talk about that coming up.
Police in New York City released video of a woman being mugged by suspects police say are Venezuelan migrants. You can see a woman being dragged across the sidewalk by a suspect on a motor scooter. Police say that robbery is connected to a coordinated string of thefts in the city. A group is apparently stealing victims' phones, hacking them, then using those phones to steal more money. New York's mayor says the city is trying to support migrants but won't tolerate crimes like this.
The overwhelming number of 170,000+ migrants and asylum seekers are attempting to continue their next leg of their journey of pursuing the American dream. But those who commit a crime will be treated like any other criminal in this city.
Well, the video of the woman being attacked comes days after security footage surfaced showing a group of migrants assaulting 2 New York City police officers. Several of those suspects were released with no bail and were later arrested in Arizona. That brings us to our national question of the day. Do you think those arrested for violent crimes should be released without bail? To make your voice heard, head to foxbaltimore.com and click on the Pulse tab. New research shows most American workers say it's difficult or impossible to consistently save for emergencies and retirement. The National Desk, Janae Bowens, has been digging through the numbers.
The biggest issue has been inflation. Now, that new survey from Bankrate shows 53% of American workers are having trouble saving. Now, that includes 44% who think it's very or somewhat difficult, and 9% who think it's impossible. Now, I spoke with Bankrate analyst Alex Gailey. She says even if it's just $5 per week, that's $3,000 in 10 years, and every dollar counts when it comes to saving. Now, Gailey added a budget is essential to save money, especially since less than half of Americans say they could afford to pay for a $1,000 emergency expense from their savings. In Washington, Janae Bowens.
Mudslides and flooding continue tormenting the western United States today. An historic and deadly atmospheric river, as it's known, is stretching east while plaguing California. Some areas report almost a foot of rain in 3 days. Crews in Los Angeles have responded to more than 300 mudslides. Officials are telling people not to drive through flood waters. It can be deadly. Look at this guy standing on top of his car. Now, it is expected to cause flooding in Nevada and Arizona later today. And what's that line, Gerard, that meteorologists always talk about? You want to get rain, just don't want it all at once, right?
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? But the weather just doesn't work that way for us. It's usually wide open where you're drinking out of the fire hose, or you get nothing. So it's kind of tough, and it's been that way for Californians, especially the years past. So tough events going on out there, although they need the moisture. This time of the year is when they get the majority of it. Man, has it been coming in crazy. All right, around here, it is as quiet as can be. Temperatures have been pretty easy to handle. We're in the 40s right now, and as we move through the night, it's going to be another chilly one. It's almost been a repeat the past several days where we get to enjoy sunshine all day long, be it a little bit on the chilly side. This is pretty much normal. Tomorrow we start stepping things up a little bit as our temperature is a little warmer. Upper 40s, around 50 degrees with the sunshine around, and Thursday we may be about that, if not even a little bit warmer, up into the mid-50s. Few clouds may pass by, but we're going to start really getting into some activity. Not California-sized activity like they're getting, but we'll start to see things changing for us. We'll talk about that. First of all, your temperature trend likely well above that average of around 45 degrees at this time of the year. So that looks spectacular, especially on a Saturday. The question is, will we be dry? Well, so far, of course, we've had high pressure in control, and that kept us very dry, very pleasant, but we're getting ready to see that break down. We're going to be seeing the storm systems rolling our way from California headed east in our direction. By the time they get to us, they're going to be broken to pieces. So we're not expecting them to bring any major impacts, at least not this one here. So we're going to show you what's going to happen with this one. First of all, that cooler air that we've been seeing is going to start to really fade away. We've been in the northerly winds. That's going to shift as the winds actually shift out of the south ahead of our next storm system, which is barely even going to make it here at all. In fact, we may only get the remains of it as it basically fizzles out just before it makes it across the Appalachians. So we're talking maybe a little bit of cloud cover as we move into Friday and into Saturday. Now, once we get beyond Saturday, we're going to see a little more moisture trying to creep its way in. Storm system's going to start developing likely down towards the Gulf Coast states. We could see the chances for some rainfall beginning as early as Saturday. It doesn't look big right now, but we'll watch it. Meanwhile, this storm system is likely going to take shape. From this point onward, it is a huge question mark where it's going to go, and that means everything. If it tracks directly over here towards Baltimore, like one model is saying, we could be seeing rainfall, perhaps some mountain snow. We'll see how that's going, but that's just one model. That's the American model saying this. The others have been very wildly shifting all over the place, so we're going to watch that carefully. Until then, it's 48 degrees as we head through tomorrow, and as we head into your 7-day forecast, looking pretty good. Saturday, we're keeping a small chance in there, and don't forget, we have the Health Expo going on down at the Baltimore Convention Center. I'll be there all the way through lunchtime, and we'll see how the weather's shaping up after that.
All right, I'm going to try not to sneeze on this story because I've got to sneeze somewhere in here. And I wanted to see Usher when he was in Vegas at his residency, and I didn't get a chance to, but I will be at the show. Grammy award-winning singer Usher is bringing his Usher Past, Present, and Future tour to Baltimore in, excuse me, in August. Thank you, sir. Usher will be traveling across the country performing in celebration of his 30-year career. Excuse me, there's that sneeze. And release of his 9th studio album, Coming Home. He'll be making stops at Capital One Arena, that's in D.C., of course, on August 20th, followed by a stop at CFG Bank Arena in Baltimore on August 24th. I will be there. Pre-sale tickets will be available starting tomorrow, with general tickets going on sale. Thank you. Thank you, Gerard. Going on sale on February 12th. Now, those of you looking forward to this weekend, as Gerard mentioned, you can see Fox 45 and the staff here. Not just people on the air, you'll meet people who are behind the scenes who work really hard so that you can see us every day. Our producers, our directors, our managers will be at the Be More Healthy Expo. We want you to be there as well because a lot of folks work really hard at the station to put the product on that we have every day, and we truly appreciate and love them. Now, the free event includes health screenings, cooking and dance demonstrations, also a chance to meet those of us who are on the air at Fox 45. Again, the Be More Healthy Expo runs this Saturday, February 10th, from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Coming up at 5 o'clock, there's breaking news in the Marilyn Mosby trial. We're live in Greenbelt with more on the verdict. We have breaking news to report. There is a verdict in the federal mortgage fraud trial of Marilyn Mosby. Now, we don't know what that verdict is, but Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost is in Greenbelt in Prince George's County, and we'll bring the very latest in a live report a few minutes away. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 5 o'clock, a murdered Baltimore tech executive's family is in Annapolis demanding change. The policies, they say, could have saved her life. A judge denies a motion to move one of the accused Brooklyn Day shooter's cases to juvenile court, what that means for his trial.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 5.
And thank you for joining us today. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. We're hearing the jury has reached a verdict in the Marilyn Mosby trial.
That's right. It comes after more than 6 hours of deliberations. It's not clear when the verdict will be read. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost has been in Greenbelt all day long. She joins us live outside the courthouse with the very latest. Mackenzie.
Yeah, Mary and Kai, I just stepped outside to give an update. We're hearing that the jury has reached a verdict. We don't exactly know when we will hear more from the court itself. Before I came outside, though, I did see Marilyn Mosby standing on the ground level of inside the building behind me with some of her supporters participating in a prayer circle. It looked like that was taking place before they were going to migrate and go upstairs inside the courtroom. Now, we know that this jury deliberations have been going on for several hours, more than 6 hours at this point. And this comes after the closing arguments were made yesterday. And we know at the heart of this case really comes down to the documents that the jury has seen time and time again, the mortgage applications, the gift letter, a different letter that Marilyn Mosby wrote to a lender when she was trying to close on the condo in Longboat Key. And those details really could be what the jury was spending all of these hours going through, combing through page by page. The defense has maintained the argument that Marilyn Mosby did not knowingly lie on those documents. She believed that she was up to date on those tax installments that her now ex-husband Nick Mosby was paying to the IRS to pay back some of those taxes that the couple did not pay for several years. But again, we're still waiting to learn exactly what the verdict will be. Earlier in the day, we did hear there may have been a jury note, potentially a question, but really it has been silent all day as the jury continued their deliberations. I'm going to go back inside and see if we can get a better idea of when we could hear a potential verdict, and I'll let you know as soon as I find out. But for now, we're live outside Greenbelt. Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
All right, Mackenzie, thank you. And once again, we're joined by defense attorney Kurt Nachman. Kurt is not affiliated with the case, but is speaking to us as a legal expert. Kurt, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, Kurt, we know the jury has reached a verdict. What are your predictions after just 6 hours of deliberations?
Yeah, so there are some sort of general rules that we follow in the criminal prosecution world, criminal defense world, and a very fast verdict, very fast meaning an hour or less, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, that's usually very defense oriented. Somewhere kind of in the medium time frame, of several hours to a day, that's very prosecution oriented. And then obviously as it goes on longer and longer, clearly there are some individuals that are in disagreement in the jury room, and that's a more defense favorable verdict. So it appears based on the time that we have, although again, there's no science behind it, based on my experience and my observations being around the courthouse for almost 20 years now, this is definitely a government friendly time scenario.
Yeah, Kurt, take us behind closed doors if you could. You weren't obviously in court, but you're familiar with the case. You're familiar with how both sides presented the evidence, at least the prosecution presented the evidence, and how the defense tried to defend Ms. Mosby. If it were you and you were in those shoes, what do you imagine that the jury is really weighing here based on the evidence presented?
Yeah, so the jury is going to, almost all judges across Maryland and federal courts give copies of what are called jury instructions. So the judge reads to the jury what is the law as applied to this particular case. So they're going to read the jury instructions for the crimes, but also how to weigh the evidence. And most judges give copies, written copies of the jury instructions to the jurors. That way they can read through them and apply them to the facts in this particular case. And so the jurors are going to go through those step-by-step instructions. This is what the crime is, and this is what was presented, and this is what the government proved, and this is what Ms. Mosby said, or her defense team said. And they're going to go through step-by-step and look at that. And what you see in for example, the Mackenzie just said that they've been deliberating for about 6 hours at this juncture. That's a pretty thorough, deliberative process of looking at the voluminous evidence, examining it in conjunction with what the law is, and then coming to a particular decision. And obviously, there's not a huge amount of dissent in that jury room as to one way or the other. If they were able to come to a unanimous decision by the way, which is 12 individuals all agreeing on the same thing, a verdict of guilty or not guilty, which is what's required in a criminal case. So, yeah, I definitely think that there was some careful, considerate deliberation in this situation.
And Kurt, if we get a guilty verdict in this case, we know there has to be sentencing then in both cases because we have the November guilty verdict of perjury. How does that happen? Does it happen in one courtroom, separate courtrooms, different times, same time?
So it's not going to happen right away. It's going to get scheduled at some point down the road in accordance with the court's schedule and calendar. We know that Judge Grigsby is not sitting in her normal courthouse, in her normal courtroom, due to the notoriety of this case. So it will more likely be moved back to her home base in Baltimore. It'll be scheduled at some point, 3, 4, 5 months down the road. There will be a pre-sentence investigation that'll be conducted.
And you've been a careful observer of both of these trials. Do you see any grounds for appeal, like anything that would be substantive at this point?
It's interesting that you mentioned that because some of the earlier pretrial rulings, particularly the decision to sever the two cases, would have, had the cases been tried together, that would have potentially been a ground for appeal. But Judge Grigsby seemed to be working very hard to limit any appellate issues that would be available to Ms. Mosby. One of the things, she severed the first case out because Ms. Mosby said she wanted to testify in that case. Turns out she testified in this case. So a lot of the appellate issues have been mitigated by the way that the judge gave the defense the opportunity to present its case.
Yeah, I mean, Kurt, a reasonable person might look at what you're saying and just again, looking at the case from a objective standpoint, it seems like Judge Grigsby has almost bent over backwards to accommodate the defense in that regard. Would that be accurate? Yeah,
not only that, I mean, she moved the case to Greenbelt, right?
The change of venue was huge.
Right.
Right. Huge victory for the Mosby camp. And also limits a potential appellate issue. So no, I don't really see a lot of appellate issues. Of course, not being in the courtroom, not seeing sort of objections and other issues that may have occurred on a day-to-day basis sort of limits my ability to understand what would have occurred and what would be grounds for appeal evidentiary-wise. But from everything that's come out, no, I didn't hear any sort of stunning or shocking pretrial decisions that went at all against the defense that could potentially be grounds for appeal.
All right, Kurt Nachman, thank you so much for jumping back on the Air Force real quickly as we await to hear what the verdict is in Marilyn Mosby's second federal trial. We appreciate it, and we'll check back in with you.
Thanks.
And stay with Fox 45 as we await the jury's decision. As soon as we find out what the verdict is, we will keep you informed and go back live to Greenbelt with Mackenzie Frost.
This morning, a Baltimore City Circuit Court judge ruled the court proceedings for Tristan Jackson will remain open to the public.
Judge Schieffer also denied the 18-year-old's request to be transferred to a juvenile facility.
Jackson is currently awaiting trial for nearly 60 violent charges issued in connection to the city's worst mass shooting in history. 2 young people were killed, 28 others were hurt in the Brooklyn Day block party.
Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor joins us live from the Mitchell Courthouse with arguments from both sides. Rebecca?
Mary and Kai, these were 2 big wins for the prosecution today. Ultimately, the judge deciding that she agreed with their argument. Tristan Jackson was 18 at the time of his alleged crimes and should be treated as such under the law. Meanwhile, the defense continues to push for juvenile protections despite Jackson's age. What court proceedings the public is privy to concerning 18-year-old Tristan Jackson up for debate inside the Mitchell Courthouse Tuesday. As one of the accused gunmen behind the devastating Brooklyn Day mass shooting, Jackson awaits trial for a laundry list of violent charges, including more than 24 counts of attempted and conspiracy to commit murder. Due to the severity of his alleged crimes and the sheer number of victims, the state pushing to retain the public's access to information involving his case, as the defense pushes to place it behind closed doors. Although no specific threats or concerns were detailed, the defense arguing the public's knowledge of where Jackson is being detained poses a safety risk to him and his family. The defense also accusing the state of leaking misinformation to the media. Defense attorney Lauren Dollar saying, quote, "They're using this to try to grow animus against our client and taint the jury pool, Your Honor, which is inappropriate." Prosecutor Michael Dunty responding with, quote, "They are asking this court to control what the media puts out there, and that's not this court's role at all." City State's attorney Ivan Bates also refuting the allegations with a statement of his own, reading in part, quote, "The fact that they would attack my staff and me personally for simply doing our jobs and protecting public safety is highly inappropriate."
I think it is very important that the residents see and understand and hear firsthand what's going on.
Attorney and legal expert Eurypsy Morgan, who has no direct ties to this case, says considering the tragedy that occurred, the Brooklyn community deserves transparency.
It would prevent the people in those communities from feeling safe again and knowing that the criminal justice system is doing everything it can to make sure that the perpetrators of that crime are being dealt with effectively.
Ultimately, Judge Jennifer Schiffer agreeing. One of the foundations of our system is that access to a public criminal trial enhances the integrity of the criminal justice system, said Schiffer, denying the request to seal court records. The defense then making the motion to transfer Jackson to a juvenile facility to pair him with educational and mental health services he's not allotted in the adult system.
This is an 18-year-old. This is a legal adult. Why would we even be discussing having an adult be put into a juvenile system?
Both Morgan and the state calling the request illogical and absurd.
This is somebody who has proven that, they cannot be out in society with everyone else and maintain the safety of the community.
Assisting in the decision-making, Assistant Attorney General for Juvenile Services, Antonio Rivera, advising Judge Schiffer she does not have the authority to guarantee Jackson would remain detained under DJS supervision. With that in mind, Schiffer denying the transfer, citing clear and convincing evidence and her duty to protect public safety. Now, among the evidence that we already know the prosecution plans to present in this case, police say that Jackson was seen on several surveillance cameras firing shots into fleeing crowds. Police also saying that the GPS coordinates to a DJS ankle monitor that Jackson had on him from a prior offense place him at the scene of the crime. Reporting live from the Mitchell Courthouse, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Pava did very well in her very short life. So now it's time for someone else to carry the torches that she carried. One of them was for equity, another for justice. So that's why we're here.
And our goal is to keep those torches lit.
The parents of Baltimore Tech CEO Pava Laer, who police say was murdered by convicted sex offender Jason Billingsley, are pushing for changes to the state's early release system.
Alexa Ashwell is live in Annapolis, where the family spoke hours ago and testified before the House Judiciary Committee. Alexa.
Yes, Kai Mary, in that testimony, emotional. Pava Laer's parents sat before the House Judiciary Committee talking about the importance of this bill, how this loss of their daughter has forever impacted their lives, and how they don't want this to happen to anyone else.
A sibling should not lose his best friend and most trusted confidant when they're both in their 20s. And a father should kiss his daughter goodnight and not try to cry himself to sleep through avoidable loss. We know this because we have lived it, and we never want any other family to have to identify their daughter's body, almost unrecognizable again.
It's hard to talk, focus, get up every day. But I have an important issue.
House Bill 301, or the Pava Laer Act, pushes for changes to the state's early release system, specifically prohibiting those convicted of first-degree rape or a first-degree sex offense from earning diminution credit, meaning time off for their good behavior. Jason Billingsley, the man accused of murdering Laer at her apartment building in Baltimore back in September, got out of prison early due to earning this good time credit. Back in 2013, Billingsley was convicted of a first-degree sex offense and released early in October 2022. Less than 1 year later, police say Billingsley raped another woman and then murdered Laer. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates and Baltimore City Councilman Mark Conway also testified before the committee in support of the bill.
This bill sends a clear message that sentences for such heinous crimes will be fully enforced, and convicted individuals will face significant consequences for their actions.
This, I believe, is a common sense approach. It makes sense. We partially do it already. But diminution credits should not be available to first-degree sexual offenders, first-degree rape convicts. I do believe that they do need that consideration, and that consideration should be available from the board, from the commission.
House Bill 301 now moves to a second reading. Reporting live in Annapolis, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Coming up on Fox 45 News, coverage of the Marilyn Mosby trial. The jury has apparently reached a verdict. Fox 45 News is in the courtroom. We'll bring you the latest when that verdict is read and known.
Johnny Olszewski running for Congress, pressing the Baltimore County executive on his plan for his community's budget as he launches his congressional run.
Can life coaches convince teens in Maryland to stay on the right path? Why some are voicing concerns with the governor's new Thrive Academy combating juvenile crime.
Some big changes coming your way. We're going to talk about that. Here are your weather headlines in the next few days. A lot of changes coming, and some of those will be rising temperatures. We could even hit 60 degrees. We'll talk about the weather pattern that's going to be changing here, too, in just a bit.
Questions about Maryland's youth programs are growing louder after police arrested 3 teenagers for shooting a 16-year-old over the weekend. The governor wants to put another $4.5 million into the newly developed Thrive Academy. It's a program where teens are paired with life coaches meant to steer them down the road to reform. However, some are arguing it won't be worth the cost. Fox 45's Jeff Abel is taking a closer look at both sides of the debate.
We need accountability for the kids that are repeatedly violating the law.
The same day the governor promised to hold kids accountable, the Juvenile Services Secretary promised to give them a chance to thrive.
Borrowing from the successful group violence reduction strategies employed around the country
including very successfully in West Baltimore.
The state is now pumping millions of dollars into the newly developed Thrive Academy, a program where teens with the most potential for violence are paired with life coaches who steer them down the road to reform. The state launched the program 4 months ago, and right now, 59 teens are taking part. And if they stay clean, there's a suitcase of rewards. Life coaches can offer financial incentives, stipends for work, even free college tuition for an entire semester. The program has some critics shaking their heads.
The life coaches they're talking about hiring actually need life coaches.
The program is modeled after Baltimore's group violence reduction strategy, which the city first launched in the Western District 2 years ago. That district ended last year with 41 homicides, making it the deadliest district in the city. But that didn't keep the governor from praising the program last month and launching a similar program for juveniles statewide. Today, a spokesman insisted that Thrive Academy was part of the governor's plan to build a more effective, less expensive, and better long-term approach toward improving public safety and bolstering opportunity for youth involved in the juvenile justice system. The governor wants to pump another $4.5 million into the program next year, a move that has some observers raising questions.
Don't double down on what's failed in the past. And I hope that the governor understands that, A, the state can't afford to be spending more money. And if they do, they need to do it in a way that there's going to be accountability, there's going to be transparency.
Because the program fails to provide intensive services for the state's most troubled teens, some critics predict it'll have little impact.
There's nothing to rehabilitate children. You have a lot of knee-jerk responses to angry communities, but the realism is you're going to still have these same children in the community committing the same crimes, and nothing is going to change.
Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
And we continue to follow the breaking news right now. There is a verdict in the federal mortgage fraud trial of Marilyn Mosby. We do not know what the verdict is just yet, but we're expecting to learn more in about 15 minutes. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost in Greenbelt will have the very latest for us. She'll bring us the verdict coming up in a live report.
All right, good evening, everyone. Okay, this has been an easy forecast for every meteorologist in the area just in the past couple of days. At least it's been quite nice outside, and you can tell the sunshine is out, and we're going to continue to see it just like this again tonight. So this is very much a carbon copy of what we have been seeing. 42 degrees right now. It's been a little chillier today, no doubt. As we move into the night, it's going to be another one of those, but maybe not quite as cold as what we saw. Here we go with temperatures dropping down to the low 30s. Tomorrow is a little bit warmer. We're going to be up near around 50 degrees. Tack on another 3 to 5 degrees as we get into your Thursday. Maybe a few passing clouds, but still it's getting more and more mild, comfortable, you could even say. But after that, we're going to really start to see temperatures, I would say, soar. We're 61 degrees on tap, as you can see, for Saturday. That average high line right there is around 45. So, wow, that is looking pretty nice. However, we're going to be talking about our chances of rain going up. It may not really be as much early this weekend, but later. One storm system coming off the Pacific. It's just been hammering California. Is going to track its way east. It's not going to have much left of it by the time it gets here, but we are going to see our temperatures become a little warmer out ahead of it. By the time it reaches us, it's mostly fallen apart. And that means, okay, we're not going to have a whole lot of rainfall as we get into Friday. Saturday, we're going to start to see things with some moisture streaming in from the south, kind of starting to diminish a little bit. So that's our day where we might hit 60, but we'll probably have a little more cloud cover and perhaps a light shower trying to sneak into the area. But better chances of rain are likely coming as we move later into early next week. Now, anything beyond this point is going to be very much a question mark. We're going to be watching at least one storm system possibly developing, moving into the area. Whether or not that happens is a great question. Only one model is really showing it hammering us directly here. So this is the takeaways that we have for later into the weekend. We have low confidence of exact track and impacts of the storm system, but we're pretty certain there's going to be one. I think any wintry precipitation appears pretty unlikely right now. I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in that. We'll watch, but otherwise changes to the forecast are going to be pretty likely in the coming days, so pay close attention. Saturday, we have the Baltimore Health Expo. That's going to be a pretty nice day as long as it stays dry, but after that, it's going to be tough. We'll see how it looks on Monday.
Coming up, breaking news in the Marilyn Mosby trial. The jury has reached a verdict. Fox 45 News in the courtroom will bring you the latest as soon as it is read. And after the break, an historic ruling in the 2020 election subversion case, how it could impact Donald Trump's defense and the top leader supporting the former president's immunity claims. A federal appeals court has ruled former President Donald Trump is not immune from prosecution for alleged crimes he committed to reverse the 2020 election results. The ruling, experts say, marks a major blow to Trump's key defense in the federal subversion case. Since the case was brought by special counsel Jack Smith, Trump has argued he had presidential immunity, and his conduct to overturn the election fell within his official duties. House Speaker Mike Johnson defended Trump's claims while speaking with reporters earlier today. This is what he had to say.
I believe that they've been after President Trump for partisan political purposes. I think that's obvious, and we call it lawfare, and I think there's no other way to describe it.
Trump has pleaded not guilty to 4 counts, including conspiring to defraud the United States and obstruct an official proceeding. Trump's team has until Monday to appeal today's ruling. We are following that breaking news. As we've been telling you, a verdict is set to be read any minute now in the federal trial of Marilyn Mosby. We're live from Greenbelt after the break.
Shocking revelations about a wave of crimes committed by migrants. I'm Christine Frizzell with news on new arrests and questions about what happens next.
We are following the breaking news. As we've been telling you, there is a verdict in the federal mortgage fraud trial of Marilyn Mosby. Everybody involved is gathering in the courtroom right now. We are expecting to learn the verdict any minute now. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost is in Greenbelt. She'll bring us the very latest in a live report.
Project Baltimore is sponsored by the Snyder Law Group. Don't just sue them, Snyder them.
Tonight, millions of your tax dollars intended to help children in Maryland's poorest schools are apparently not being spent. That according to a report just released by the Inspector General for Education. A few years ago, Maryland's legislature passed the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which increased funding for public schools. The law, known as what's known as the Concentration of Poverty Grant, well, this grant provides extra funding to schools in areas with the highest rates of poverty and crime. Maryland has 24 public school systems. The IG report only looked at 8 of them and found $12.3 million in grant money was sent to those 8 school systems, but sat unused from fiscal year 2020 to 2022. The report blames the Maryland State Department of Education for a lack of policies and training, and school systems didn't know how to spend the money or what to spend it on. Coming up tonight at 10 o'clock on Fox 45 News Project Baltimore, excuse me, Chris Papst is looking at this report, including how MSDE responded to the allegations.
Turning now to your election 2024 coverage, the race for the House is now one to watch after Dutch Ruppersberger announced last week he will not be seeking re-election. Today on Fox 45 Morning News, we spoke to one of the top contenders for the job, Baltimore County Executive Johnny Olszewski, about his plans for his county's budget and also his response to the backlash surrounding a housing deal he announced.
Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger announces his retirement after 11 terms, creating a frenzy of candidates as Baltimore County now faces its 2025 fiscal budget. Congressional candidate and Baltimore County Executive Johnny Olszewski says he's holding public forum town halls right now to get input from his residents for the budget, while also addressing what he would do if he gets a chance to head to D.C.
We believe that government is best serving our people when we're active, engaged, open, and accessible, and that's what these town halls are all about.
2 areas, though, that may be coming up. One is the housing. There's an increase in public housing that's going through 460 units over. Some people are saying, okay, wait a minute, is this the tie-in with the southern border? Is this some way that we can get illegal immigrants living in Baltimore County on our tax dollars? That was one question that was brought up. Other one is youth public safety, especially with youth crime.
I'll say as member of Congress, I'll support both secure borders and a responsible path to citizenship. As it relates to the housing deal we announced, it's the largest attainable housing deal in the county's history. We're actually partnering to both improve the conditions of existing units throughout Baltimore County while preserving affordability. And what that will do is actually will keep a lot of the residents who are already living here, who are already serving us as teachers and firefighters and people who serve us in the restaurant, will help them prevent from being displaced so that they can keep serving and being productive members of our society.
Executive Olszewski went on to say that he will be supporting and testifying with Chief McCullough in Annapolis for policies that both provide service to stop youth from engaging in crime and then hold them accountable if they do. Tom Rogers, Fox 45 News.
We find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And in count 4 of involuntary manslaughter against Justin Schilling, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
A mother in Michigan is found guilty of manslaughter over a school shooting committed by her son.
Jennifer Crumbley's son, Ethan, killed 4 people and injured 6 others at Oxford High School in 2021. Now, the prosecution pointed to text messages from the shooter to his mother, saying he was hallucinating and seeing ghosts. Apparently, those texts went ignored. His mother also apparently bought him a gun for his birthday days before the shooting that she posted on social media about taking him to a shooting range to test out his new weapon.
On the day of the shooting, both Jennifer and her husband were called into Ethan's school after a teacher found a drawing he made of a gun and a person bleeding with the captions, "The thoughts won't stop me," and "My life is useless." Well, the lawyer told them their son needed immediate mental health help, the school counselor rather, and suggested they take him home. But they declined, saying they did not want to miss work. They also failed to tell the counselor they had bought him a gun just days earlier. Soon after they left, he used that gun to kill 4 other students.
Well, Ethan's father, James Crumbly, is set to go on trial himself in March. He's facing the same charges Jennifer was found guilty of a short time ago.
Incidents of violent crime in New York City said to be perpetrated by migrants are no longer isolated.
New York City police are sounding the alarm about the growing number, which some lawmakers say has come at the expense of people's sense and safety and security.
National correspondent Christine Frizzau has more on what we're learning and a warning some of the images may be disturbing.
Police say the victims are often women, like the one seen in this horrific video, being dragged by migrants on a moped. Police say it's one incident in a much larger phone-snatching criminal enterprise in which suspect Victor Parra sends out WhatsApp messages detailing what types of cell phones he's looking for.
These thieves would ride up behind their victims on the sidewalk, steal their property, and then make their getaway.
Chief Detective Joe Kenny says most of those taking part live in New York City's migrant shelter system and make hundreds of dollars per stolen phone. Several suspects involved were arrested Monday as law enforcement faces new challenges in this wave of migrant crime.
They're essentially ghost criminals. No criminal history, no photos, no cell phone, no social media. Sometimes we're even unclear on a name or a date of birth.
Another major arrest Monday of suspects involved in this video of New York City police officers assaulted in Times Square. The suspects, also migrants, were initially arrested and then set free without bail, to the shock of many.
A sanctuary city should not mean protecting criminals.
And a 2-week operation led by Immigration and Customs Enforcement that just wrapped up led to the arrest of 171 undocumented migrants with previous criminal charges and convictions, what former CBP head Mark Morgan calls the tip of the iceberg.
In the past 36 months, CBP has encountered over 90,000 criminals trying to illegally enter our border, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members.
Of course, the vast majority of migrants are not committing crimes and make the dangerous journey to get here out of fear and desperation. But their ability to be let in and remain in the country is now at the center of debate in Washington and nationwide. I'm Christine Frizzau reporting.
And that brings us to our question of the day, our national question. Do you think those arrested for violent crimes should be released without bail? 97% of those who voted say yes. You can weigh in by heading to foxbaltimore.com/vote and clicking on the Pulse tab. The union representing border agents and the acting chief of Customs and Border Protection announced that they have both endorsed the Senate's bipartisan border bill. The National Border Patrol Council, which represents more than 1,800 Border Patrol officers, said the deal is not perfect, but it would cause a drop in illegal border crossings. CBP head Troy Miller says it would provide the strongest tools officials have had in years. Now, the endorsements come as the Senate deal faces mass pushback from House Republicans, with GOP leadership pledging that it will not get a vote in the House if it passes in the Senate.
Well, my biggest apprehension is that given the fact that President Biden has not used the current laws that are in effect, I worry what he will do with this new set of proposals and whether it will actually make any difference.
We're getting hammered in Texas. This is not going to solve the problem.
Well, a vote on the bill is scheduled to happen tomorrow. 60 votes are needed in order for it to pass. 24 senators have already publicly stated they will be voting against that legislation. Well, the results are in from Monday's question of the day. We asked, who do you think would do a better job of handling the economy, the border crisis, and foreign policy? 21% of you said President Biden, 79% said former President Trump.
And this just in, breaking, the jury finds former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby not guilty of the federal mortgage fraud, but guilty of the Longboat Key charge. Not guilty of the Kissimmee one, but guilty of the Longboat Key one. This comes after more than 6 hours of deliberations today. According to prosecutors, the former City State's Attorney lied to secure a better mortgage interest rate on 2 vacation homes in Florida. Throughout the trial, Mosby and her entire team have maintained she did not knowingly lie on the mortgage forms, but the jury has ultimately decided that she did lie on at least one of those.
Right now, we're joined by defense attorney Kurt Nachman. So, Kurt, again, you've been following this case. What is your thought? Kind of like a split decision here, guilty on one count, not guilty on another.
Definitely a split decision. It may have come down to the fact that, her husband testified that certain things were taken care of in a certain time frame, without knowing exactly and not having all the evidence in front of me. The timing of when those homes were purchased may have been critical to the juror's decision to find her guilty of one count and then not the other.
A really astute jury, though, to be able to take the minutia of all of these mortgage documents and everything and to really look and to be able to see that there was a difference in this. What do you think the slight variation was?
Yeah, sometimes you look into jurors' decision-making processes, and every time I've spoken to a juror after the fact, win, lose, or draw on a case, I always walk away sort of shaking my head because jurors often pick up on things that either you didn't think were an issue at all or you thought was, even the other side in the case, didn't think was a big deal. So it's really hard to say what the jurors may have focused on in this particular case.
Hey, Kurt, who's this a victory for? The prosecution, the defense, and then what does sentencing look like here?
Yeah, so first of all, it's a victory for the prosecution in the sense that they got the conviction, they secured a conviction in the case. It's a victory for the defense in that she wasn't convicted on both counts, although I'm sure Ms. Mosby was hoping to be not convicted on either count.
Exactly.
Losing on anything is certainly going to be critical.
And Kurt, right now, if it's okay, we're going to toss it right to Mackenzie Frost. She's outside the courthouse with the latest on this split verdict. Mackenzie?
Yeah, Mary, so we could hear Marilyn Mosby actually start to sob in between each verdict as it was being read inside the courtroom. And really, the jury was polled, and they unanimously decided that it was the gift letter that Marilyn Mosby signed indicating that her now ex-husband, Nick Mosby, was the one to gift her the $5,000. The jury deciding that was the lie, and that's how they arrived at the decision to find her guilty for the Longboat Key mortgage fraud charge. Now, they found her not guilty of the Kissimmee property, and really we've gone through so many different mortgage applications and all of these documents, and I heard you, Mary, earlier talking about how the jury was really able to go through the minutia of some of this evidence, and that's clearly what they were doing in the hours that it took them to deliberate and arrive at this verdict.
Yeah, and so, Mackenzie, what happens now? We were talking with Kurt Nachman a second ago. I asked him, who's this a victory for? Because in this instance, unlike the first trial, she was guilty on everything here. This one's kind of split. Now, appellate situation aside, what do you think sentencing might look like here?
Well, we know that she faces the maximum is 30 years for each charge. One charge now 30 years. It's probably unlikely that she will get sentenced to 30 years in prison. We'll have to wait and see what the appellate situation looks like. We know that her defense team has indicated that they do plan to file an appeal for the perjury charge, although that hasn't happened yet. So now we're waiting for everyone to come outside and potentially ask them if there will be another appellate moves in this case as well.
Mackenzie, you were at this trial